Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 6th, I believe, of our unlocking sections of our bi-weekly webinar series. Now, we're going to wait just a little bit because we found that people are signing on a little bit late. And the next slide I'm going to show you is just for people that are having trouble with sound. So let me get onto here. So I guess if you can hear me, you don't need to pay attention to this, but if people are having trouble with their sound, that might be the reason they're having sound. So we'll just kind of wait a minute while a few more people sign on. We've decided to use this platform because it allows us more participants and it allows for the recording that we do for our playbacks for all the people. And we've had some big successes in this bi-weekly webinars every Tuesday and every Thursday at 6 o'clock. Let me turn off that noise because I turned that off earlier and it just reopened somehow. And there we go. All right. We're going to get started here. Just a little bit about me so you know who I am. I'm Chuck Skewes. I own 3 Ullman sales lofts. I've had some success in racing over the years. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a sailmaker since 1986, and I'm in the fortunate position of sailing more miles a year than I drive my car. Tonight, we're going to talk about these terms you get for sail selection, and as you sail more and more and talk to more sails, they'll say, oh, we use the code 0, we use the fro, we used all this. And I'm going to spend some time just explaining what these are and what their wind ranges are so that you, as a sailor, can make a decision whether you need them in your inventory or you don't need them in your inventory. Because if you had every one of these in your inventory, you'd be one of the most Grand Prix programs on the planet. So you need to decide what type of sailing you're going to do and what your budget is and what type of boat you have versus how much speed potential it's going to get off of this. Now, when we sail offshore or even around the buoys, for instance, we use a sail crossover chart like this. And now the numbers on the left are true wind angles, and the numbers across the top is knots of wind. And where they cross is color-coded, and down below you can see the sails that we pick. Now, you're not going to have something for every direction. You notice the big gray areas? That's because you don't sail in those areas. Like, you can't sail super high upwind in really light air. You can't sail super low downwind in super light air as well. And so there's areas that you just physically don't sail. And as we developed these, we actually found areas in the middle that we didn't sail as well. Like the boat probably at 115 was not effective. It's better to sail higher and a little further, or lower and a little slower to do the same thing. And so these are all personal for each individual boat, and so you need to spend time with your own boat and your sailmaker or really highly qualified crew member that can help you analyze this. And I recommend that you get a sail crossover chart with your entire inventory on it so that you're not guessing at whether your boat's going to be faster at one wind range or the other, where you know the hard crossover point of your sails. So we're going to start with spinnakers, because this is probably the hardest thing for people to get grasp, is the spinnaker designations. Now, as you can see, the reason I bring up a polar chart is in 20 knots, you're sailing at 160 degrees true wind angle, and in 8 knots of wind, you're sailing at 93. So, and this is for kind of an average boat. But what this tells you is that you can't use a sail that's designed for sailing 155 if it's going to be sailing at 90 degrees. That the same sail is not efficient in that wide a wind range. So this is where we go into like, to be at maximum performance in all conditions, you can have a sail built for every condition. Is this practical to the average racer? Absolutely not. It is not practical. So that's where you need to make the decision based off your ability, your boat's ability, your budget, and the type of races you do. So we're going to get this all set up for you. Now, the designations, when someone says, I've had the 2A up or the 3A up, 4A up, or the 2S up. The A just stands for asymmetric, and the S stands for symmetrical. So even numbers are running numbers, and odd numbers are reaching numbers. So we're going to go into this in a little more detail here. Obviously, when you look at a spinnaker like this, you can see that this is a running spinnaker. You would not reach with this. And you can often sail in ranges outside of the sails designation. It's just your performance might not be at its maximum, and you might not be losing a ton, but it might be the alternative. Like, for instance, this J120 is got an A2, which is a standard class A2 style sail, and it's reaching at, I'm guessing right here at 115, 120 true wind angle. Now, it's not as effective as putting up an A3 or a 3A. It is, however, more effective than just having the Genoa up. So there are times that you can push the limits of your sail, but if your competition has everyone to go in that range, you're going to start seeing a performance difference between your two boats. So everyone has probably seen these charts, and it lists like where the sails cross over. Now we're going to start with the Code Zero. It's probably the biggest mystery sail. People don't understand what it is, and it's named a Code Zero because it doesn't really fit a designation very well. It's really a Genoa, but it rates as a spinnaker. And the way that happens is the mid-girth has to be 75% of the foot length. And when this happens, it is now a spinnaker. It's not a head sail. So if it is not your largest spinnaker, which it never is, it doesn't change your rating. So it's a cheater sail. And rating systems have tried to figure out how to rate these, and it's been almost impossible because there has to be a designation of what's a spinnaker and what's a head sail. And they're working a lot on the offshore racing rules right now to measure all your spinnakers in and then add them into a calculation, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, in racing, the A0 or the Code Zero is a spinnaker, and so it is rated as a spinnaker, and it is not your largest spinnaker, so you don't take a hit for it. It's bigger than the Genoa. It's rated as a spinnaker, so no increase in rating like I was talking about. And in turn, if we were going to build a sail for this angle of sail that we build the Code Zeros for without a rule involved, we'd build a different sail. But since we have to follow a rule and hit that 75% girth, there's sometimes a little leach flutter, and there's a couple other problems. You end up getting a little more left fold back than you want for that type of sail. And that's just because we're trying to meet a rule so that you can still have a fast sail or be sailing fast at that angle and still be in the racing rules of sailing. So when you look at a cruising Code Zero, here's the head-on of a Beneteau 51.1, those are actually designed better than the racing Code Zeros because we don't have to meet that 75% girth. That's where it really gets, where the rules have never made anything faster. It just makes things restricted. Now, the Code Zeros are often made out of a laminate, a light laminate that's very similar in weight to nylon, but it's much lower stretch. And once they started coming out with the Code Zeros, the original ones were nylon, they came out with this cloth, and we've gained huge performance differences because they load up much more than a spinnaker because the apparent wind is so far forward, there's much more wind in the sail than if you were rowing. So when do you need a Code Zero? On point-to-point races is probably the most common. They're a little difficult to shift in and out of compared to like just sending up a spinnaker and retrieving a spinnaker and repacking it because they're a little heavier and stiffer and they require more luff tension and things like that. So light air to medium air tight reaching where you're not quite powered up with your Genoa, you're going to be plenty powered up with a Code Zero. In most Southern California medium distance races like Newport Ensenada, Little Ensenada, the SoCal 300, the Islands race, Code Zeros are definitely used in almost every one of those. In Newport Ensenada race for the first couple hours right off the start, right? You go from a Genoa to a Code Zero, then to a spinnaker. Races to Hawaii. I don't think I've raced to Hawaii out of the 13 I've done without putting a Code Zero up. We've often sit in a Code Zero for a day or day and a half. So they're almost a must if you're going to race to Hawaii. And that includes out of San Francisco, the Pacific Cup races, because you're reaching pretty tight before you get that spinnaker up. And they are way better on boats that are fractional rig with masthead spinnakers than they are on masthead Genoa boats, just because the size difference of your head sail is substantially more when you have a Code Zero versus a boat that has a full 155% Genoa. So next on the list is the 1A. Now the 1A is very similar to the Code Zero, but it's a nylon sail, and it is built for really similar wind ranges. And so it's a reaching sail because you have to sail those angles in light air. The angles that you have to sail when you would have a 1A up are tight reaching angles just because there's no wind. Now, here's kind of a profile look of what a 1A looks like. They're pretty super flat in the exit with a little bit of roundness forward, narrower head, and they're nowhere near a full-size sail because there's not enough breeze to support the leeches if it was a full-size sail. And if you look here, you'll see that the 1A and the Code Zero overlap quite a bit. There's this little sliver of wind down low that, for going a little bit lower, that the 1A actually fits in. And what we have found is that the overlap is substantial between the 1A and the Code Zero. So if you have to pick between one of those, generally the Code Zero is a more versatile sail. But in really light air, when you're trying to sail down low, the 1A, someone with a 1A is going to beat you up a little bit. So here's the Code Zero angles 45 to 100 apparent wind angle. I'm talking appearance now, and the 1A is 50 to 90. So Code Zero is 45 to 100, and the Code 1A is 50 to 90. So it's not a big radical difference. So if you're a really budget crunch and you want to do some of these races, talk to your sailmaker about what you like, what you think is going to be more your sail to go. And I have personally leaned more towards the Code Zero because you can use it in a more wide range of sails. You're going to end up using it more than you will your 1A most of the time. Now we get into the 2A. The 2A is the most common sail that you're going to get. When a one design class comes around, it's in full 2A. It's generally, we're trying to get down low, J105s, J120s, in most PHRF boats with a single sail, it's a 2A. That's the most common sail you're going to get because it's a full-size sail and it's a running sail. You know, you can, like I showed you that picture earlier with that J120 really trying to reach, that you can do with it. It's not as effective as having a correct reaching sail, but the 2A is the most versatile sail that you're going to have. And if you get a spinnaker and it's called an AP, generally it's built to the 2A parameters. And it's either the largest or close to largest. If you have a 4A in your repertoire, you know, the 4A could be a little bigger, and I'll get into that in a minute. So here's a couple classic 2As, a Flying Tiger and a Transpac 52. You can see the big shoulders. They're designed for running. The big difference is a 2A for a planing boat like these two is going to be different than a 2A for a displacement boat like a heavier J boat or a Beneteau or something. That they're different designs. So what's a 2A for one is not going to be a 2A for the other, and that's important to remember as you go forward. So now the 3A. This is a super valuable sail if you're racing to Hawaii and if you're in a windy area, because when you get up into the reaching angles that you can, that you're having trouble staying on your feet with a 2A up, the 3A is a great sail. Now, it's larger than your Code Zero. It's similar in size to the 1A, but it's built for much more wind. It's built with more twist than the 2A, and it's a narrower head angle than your 2As and your 4As. It is a reaching sail, and it's a valuable sail. When you can get into one of these and your competition doesn't have one, you'll start crushing people because the boat just stands on its feet a little bit more and the drive goes forward. It's a very good sail to have. But if you're just racing buoy races, you would never use a 3A. And if you're doing short races where you don't do a lot of spinnaker changes, or spinnaker changes are expensive because the runs are short, you probably wouldn't do a 3A either because you need the 2A for the running. Now we get into the 4A. The 4A is very similar to the 2A. Sometimes it's a little bit larger because it's used for sailing in much more wind, and so the shoulders can be projected as much as possible. And it is into the range of where you're really starting to get going, where some boats are planing, some boats are just surfing and stuff. Now, the difference in shape is that it is actually built for lower apparent wind angles because the wind at this point is much greater than the boat speed, and so the wind, the apparent wind is clocked behind slightly, so it's a more of a running shape. You sail just a few degrees lower with a 4A up than you do in a 2A in similar conditions. It's built for sailing very low in a lot of wind. And here's a great picture of us just cooking along with the 4A. So it gives you an idea of the kind of wind you're going to be using a 4A. At 2A, you're using it up into 20 knots true. So 4A starts stepping in at that 20 knot range. And on bigger boats, we've started going with plastic sails for the same thing. Now the 5A, it's a heavy weather reacher. I actually struggled to even find photos of this because nobody's out taking photos when you have a 5A up. But it is smaller in twist than the 3A. It's smaller than the Code Zero because we're not looking for sail area. We're just looking for a downwind sail to really go. And they're often made of the same fabric as the Code Zero. And some of them are fractional. And if you have a masthead spinnaker boat that's a fractional rig, lots of times your 5A is going to be a fractional sail. So those are things to kind of think about. And like I said, you got to pick the races. And if you're racing in Southern California only, 5A is probably not going to be in your inventory. If you're racing to Hawaii, it might be. If you're going to be racing in the Bay Area, maybe doing the Farallones race, yeah, it's probably going to be in there. It's just not as common as all the other sails that we just talked about. Here's a little bit of a picture of a 5A, plastic 5A, and you can see how narrow it is. It just meets those mid-girth requirements, and it's shorter on the foot than your Code Zero. So some other designations that we have is you have these sails. Someone will say I have a 1.5A or I have a 2.5A. Those are hybrids between like a 1A and a 2A, and the difference is it's a low sailing 1A. It's kind of it's a tweener sail, and like in places like San Diego where we are today, the 1.5A gets a tremendous amount of use because it's never quite light enough for us to use the 1A, but we can't quite keep the shoulders of the 2A up in most of the breeze we have. So we have a kind of a small 2A, and it's called the 1.5A. Some people call it a 1.5 plus or a 1 or 1A plus or something, but that's what it is. It's a hybrid. And a 2.5A is basically a 2A with it built for heavier winds, just built with more robust features in it. It's probably the same shape. It's just built to carry it up higher in the wind range. Rather than being from 9 to 20, it might be from 15 to 24. So those are you'll hear those tones, and that's basically what we're talking about there. So now when we get into the head sails, I'm going to go into kind of some of the real basics of what we're talking about. We're talking about 150% and 160 and 135s and all that. And then I'll talk into these J1, J2s and the masthead zeros and the froze and the J zeros. The measurements on sailboats, they have the IJ, P, and E, and this is a diagram of what those stand for. If you have a PHF certificate and you've never filled one out before, that is what is showing up on your certificate. Now the J measurement is from the front of the mast to where the forestay intersects the deck, and that's the J measurement. Now when we talk about 150% Genoa, 155% Genoa, we're talking about what the luff perpendicular, or the LP, is of the J. So they're not even measured in the same spot. It's just that is how it's been determined. We measured these sails years ago, and that's how it's done. It has nothing to do with the foot length. You put the clew way up in the air, you can still be at 155% with a much longer foot. So it's the luff perpendicular, 90 degrees off the luff to the clew. So it varies on clew height where you measure from the luff, and then that divided by your J gives you the measurement. So let me go here. For some reason, my clock keeps turning on, and I keep turning it off. Okay, so number one is either an AP sail, like on something like on an Olsen 30, you might have just one number one, and it's 155%. Here's a picture of one. On a bigger boat, you'll have a heavy and a light number one, and I'm going to go show you a couple pictures here. This is a light number one on a 50-foot boat, and this is a heavy one on a 50-foot boat. The biggest difference isn't the size; it's a flatness in the. I'm sorry about that. I can't keep that thing. It automatically turns on. You can't sail a 50-foot boat or the bigger boats with as full of Genoa in heavy weather as you can in light weather. So what you're going to do is you have to either suffer in the light air or suffer in the heavy air or have two sails. And as you can see, the distinct shape difference in these two sails is one significantly flatter. Now this stops a lot of the blowback in the main. The boat's pointing much higher, going much faster. But this sail in light air, you would never get going. Then we talk about number twos, and number twos are anywhere from 135 to 145 usually. And the reason is the clew has to come back far enough past the shroud to allow a sheeting angle to still stay in that pointing range of under 12 degrees or under 10 degrees on a lot of boats. If it ended out by the shrouds, you'd get 18 degrees and you'd have 0 point. And number twos have a very small range that you sail in. They generally overlap the number 3 more than they overlap the number 1, and it has more to do with sea state. And then when you get into a number 3, most of us all know this, it's a non-overlapping. It sheets in front of the spreaders for pretty good wind. That's the basic package. You get a number 4, it's basically a number 3, just a little bit shorter on the hoist, a little bit smaller sail area. And that's your basic package for upwind, downwind, for most of your things. Now I'm going to get into some of these other designations because there's a lot of new things that have come out, especially like the Volvo boats talk about it, or a lot of the TP52s or Med 52 boats. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this J1. The J1 is their number 1 jib. It is their primary upwind head sail for light medium air, and it's a full-size, non-overlapping head sail. That's kind of their class. And then when you get into what we call a J2, and the reason these are J's is they're jibs. They're not Genoa, so we call Genoa number 1 or heavy number 1 or light number 1. And these are called J's because they're jibs. That's what the J stands for. And so the J2 is generally the same size as the J1, but the flatter shape, just like we talked about with light and heavy number 1s. Now, when you get to the J3, they go down significantly in size. And on the Volvo boats, they actually go to an inner forestay that is smaller. And then they go from their J3 to the storm jib. And the storm jib, you'll see boats that are reaching along. You'll see things like Comanche and Wild Oats. They're reaching along with 3 head sails. Well, the racing rules of sailing only want you to have 2 head sails, but you can fly your storm jib at any time you need to. So they use the storm jib as another staysail, so they have 3 head sails up at once. And that's why there's always a bright orange sail in that lineup, as you see. Then you get a 1 design class, like something like the Volvo boats. They're allowed to do things different other than what the general public does for their sailing. Then you have the masthead 0, and this on most boats that are out here racing in handicap racing, a 0 still has to meet that 50% girth has got to be the halfway girth has got to be 75% or greater of the foot. When you're talking about some of these classes that allow different things, they'll have these basically masthead giant Genoas. And some people have decided to take the penalty for having these large Genoas, but they're still called a masthead zero because it's in place of having the code zero. They end up with a better sail, more efficient shape because of those problems I talked about with standard code zeros. And then there's the thing called the fro. That's just a fractional code zero. They just nicknamed it the fro because when you look at it, it's FR0 and it looks like fro. And then lately there's this thing that's come the J0. And it's a jib, but it goes to the masthead where the code zero goes to, and it's locked in at the head of the mast still. So you get better pointing for it, and it's a lighter sail. And you'll see only a couple boats here in Southern California with it, but you'll see boats that race on the Grand Prix circuit around the world. You'll see this more and more common. All right, do we have any questions? Oh, wow, you guys have kept the questions to a minimum. I saw Bruce Cooper is online here, too, to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Just have one coming in, and definitely if you want to put the last slide up.
Okay.
We'll wait and kind
of... Okay. I went the wrong way here. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so I'll read it if you can repeat it. What sort of asymmetrical setup do you recommend for short-handed racing? Does Ullman make ASIMs with furling capabilities without a torsion wire?
So the question was, what setup for ASIMs asymmetrical spinnakers, do you recommend for short-handed racing? And do we, as Ullman Sails, make sails that are for furling without the wire? We do make those. There's still the jury's out on whether it's a very good thing for short-handed because furling is still not, I'd put it on the 70% reliability rate. It's the difference between a torsion line furling and what they call cableless furling, code zero, is that on a cableless, they can put a positive luff on it that sucks some of that problem that we talked about out of the leech, so it moves the girth forward in the sail, so they can still hit that 75% girth and have generally a better shape. It takes a special kind of boat for that because you have to have the ability to have a lot of tension and low stretch halyards, and so it's not something that you just drop on any PHRF racing boat and expect great results from. But that technology is going pretty fast, and I think that that's a pretty darn good solution for short-handed sailing. I think the furlings is not a bad situation at all. And so I would probably plan on setting the boat up for short-handed sailing with a furling system, but make sure you talk to a rigger and have the right kind of halyards and right kind of tack lines and right kind of backstay so that you can have a more reliable furling system.
Cool. Got a few more. So first, on a boat like an Ullman 30 in San Diego, you recommend a 1 if not planning to race with full crew weight?
So the question was, a boat like an Ullman 30 in San Diego, would you plan on racing with a number 1 if you didn't have full crew and crew weight? I still would race most of San Diego conditions, especially what we've had for the last 3 years of Wednesday night racing. The number 1's still going to be the sail because I would say that 30% of them had people sitting to leeward. So you're still going to be fast. You can, you can twist them off and carry it, but you need that power at the low end of the wind. They dying at the end of the races and maybe even at the beginning of the races on some of the days when we're still getting the June gloom. Of course, who knows if we're going to be racing in June yet. So, I would say unequivocally that we'd do number 1 for that.
Cool. And here's another question from Roger. What general purpose sails would you recommend for a cruising couple? Doesn't give the boat, but...
Okay, so what general purpose sails would you recommend for a cruising couple? And I get this a lot because we actually do a lot of cruising webinars, or I do a lot of cruising, and I run seminars and webinars for cruisers. In fact, Thursday's webinar is going to be on cruising rallies. So if you're interested in cruising at all, that's going to be a good one to be part of. You really want a sail that you want two main things. Is you want a main with a minimum of 2 reefs, and if you're having a new main made, I recommend that you have the reefs moved up so that you don't have the shallow reef in it, because that's something that you generally won't use that much in cruising. And then a 135 to a 130% Genoa with the ability to reef it, meaning it has a luff flattening system in it, either a foam luff or a rope luff, and the extended patches on the head and tack. Those are key. Those 2 sails are going to get you through a lot of it. And then a simple all-purpose asymmetrical spinnaker with an ATN sock. You can do all these sails single-handed, and you probably, if you start off with those sails fresh or near fresh, you won't have to have any replacement for many years to come.
Well, great answer. So, no more questions. We'll give it another minute. Can you talk about Thursday?
So Thursday, we're going to talk about cruising rallies, and one of the big rallies we're going to talk about is the Baja Haha. We're also going to talk about the Coho Ho, which is the rally from Seattle area, Puget Sound, down to Southern California. We're going to talk a little bit about the Arc Rally and this new rally that started a couple of years ago called the Panama Posse. It's a new type of rally. It's gained huge popularity in the last 2 years, and this year has been a great addition to the cruisers, because basically, rather than a rally of boats cruising together, this is an information source and an information gathering. So as the COVID virus was shutting down borders and ports, there was daily of weekly updates from people that had actual experience going into these ports and reporting back. And so it was a very, very good resource for cruisers, and it's another one of the benefits of being part of a rally. So that's going to be this Thursday at 6 o'clock. And like I said, these are going to be every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. On this platform for now. And so you can use this same link to get on. And hopefully you guys had an easy time getting on.
Perfect. You answered the last question was about the link. And
all right.
You already said that. Okay.
All right. Everybody have a great night, and we will talk to you next week. Or Thursday, sorry.